Hello, my name's Stuart, and 8 years ago I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. My first symptoms of MS came when I was 14 years old. My first ever symptom was numbness down the whole of the left side of my body, and I was actually swimming at the time, and I remember pulling myself out of the water and obviously having absolutely no idea what was going on. I went to see my GP, and he put me on a course of steroids for 5 days, and the numbness cleared up after around about a week, and then I was back to normal. And then around about 3 months after this, I woke up one morning with double vision, which was very scary. And again, I didn't actually know the reason for either of these two episodes. So again, I went to see my GP, and again was prescribed steroids, which worked really well. It did clear it up after like around about 7 days. But seeing as this was my sort of second episode, I was sent to my local hospital for an MRI scan. And I had my MRI scan, and a few weeks later, I had an appointment with a neurologist at my hospital for the results of my scan, and that was when I was told that I had MS. And when I was given the news that I have MS, it didn't really mean a lot to me. By that point, I was 15, and I had heard of it. I'd heard of MS, but that was as far as it went. And perhaps not knowing anything about it was maybe to my advantage. It might have just made things a little bit easier. Probably being naive was a good thing. I feel. And I left the hospital, and over the next sort of week or two, I decided that I wanted to research MS to find out what it was, and I think doing that was quite a big step. I think it's important to have the knowledge of what MS is, and any available treatments, and sort of symptoms. It's useful to. I've certainly found it useful to have that knowledge, and MS is in the central nervous system. Our nerves are surrounded by a protective coating called myelin, which helps messages travel quickly between the brain and the body. But in MS, this myelin is mistaken sort of for a foreign body, and your body actually attacks it. And this does damage the myelin, and it strips it off the nerve fibers, either partially or completely, which leaves scars known as plaques or lesions, which often are shown on an MRI scan as sort of white blobs. And as a result of this damage to the myelin, messages can become distorted, slow down, or not get through at all. And this is what causes the symptoms of multiple sclerosis. After I was diagnosed, I discussed possible treatment options that I had read up on the MS Society website. I discussed these possible treatments with my MS nurse, and a few weeks after being diagnosed, I started on a disease-modifying treatment called Avonex, which is a once-weekly intramuscular injection, and my injections went well to start with. My MS nurse actually used to come round to my house every week for the first sort of 6 to 8 weeks, just to help support me and make sure that I was feeling comfortable and being able to do it, basically. And that was a really, really big help, and that was something I really did appreciate. But after a while, I decided that I wasn't too happy on the treatment. I was finding the injections quite hard to do to myself, and again I discussed my options with my nurse, and I changed my treatment to a drug called Rebif, which is a 3 times weekly injection, but the injection, the needle is a lot smaller. It's just an under the skin injection rather than an intramuscular one. So I hope that having the smaller needle might have sort of helped me a little bit. And again, I was on Rebif for probably a year or so, and I found this quite difficult. I was experiencing lots of different side effects from the treatment, particularly sort of flu-like symptoms, headaches, shivering, sweating. It was quite difficult, and sometimes the symptoms could come on as soon as probably half an hour after doing an injection. And obviously I was still at school at this age, and this made school very difficult. I was struggling to get into school the day after an injection, which I was sitting my exams and studying for my exams, and I found this this affected me almost more than the MS did at the time, and this was difficult. So I discussed with my MS nurse, and I actually came off all disease-modifying treatment when I was around about 18, because at the time the only thing that was really available was injections, and I couldn't bring myself to actually administer to myself anymore. So between around about 18 and 20 or so, I actually came off all disease-modifying treatment until I was getting on for 21, and I had 2 quite heavy relapses in quite a short space of time, and that was when I realised that I knew I had to get back onto some sort of treatment to try and settle these relapses down, and try and sort of get back to having a settled MS, if you like. So I was given another MRI scan in late 2010, and this showed that my MS had actually progressed quite considerably in between 15 and sort of, like I said, nearly 21. And my MS was classed as being highly active relapsing remitting MS. Now there's 4 types of MS. There's relapsing remitting, there's secondary progressive, there's benign, there's relapsing remitting, there's secondary progressive, and there's primary progressive. Now, relapsing remitting is the most common form of MS. Around 85% of people are first diagnosed with relapsing remitting MS, and this is when symptoms can come and go, and you can go through spells of relapse where you might have a flare-up of symptoms, followed by a period of remission where you're not symptom-free, but you're more settled, if you like. So I was told that my MS was very active, and it progressed quite a lot in 5 years or so. So my nurse suggested that I start a new treatment, which is called Tysabri. So in January 2011, I started on this treatment called Tysabri, and what kind of attracted me to it was it is once a month, and also it's administered in the hospital, intravenously via a drip. So I was quite happy about the fact that I didn't sort of have to do it to myself, because, like I said, I did find that difficult previously, and also the fact that it was once a month. And I started this in January 2011, and I'm still on it now, getting on for nearly 3.5 years later, and it's been a very, very good treatment for me. In January 2011, as well as starting a new treatment, I also started up running. Now, running has never been anything I've had any particular interest in. I enjoyed 100 meters, 200 meters at school, but beyond that, I couldn't stand, if I'm quite honest. But I wanted something to sort of keep me active, just to keep me moving, and also I had the aim of doing some fundraising for MS Society Scotland. I was quite aware, between being diagnosed and up until sort of that sort of time, I was actually quite aware of a lot of negative stories about MS, and I was quite keen to try and create my own positive story. So I started running in the start of 2011, and I registered for a couple of events that year, which I ran the Inverness Half Marathon in March, and I ran the Loch Ness Marathon in October. And by the time I'd finished the Loch Ness Marathon in October, I'd raised £5,000 for MS Society Scotland. And this meant, a hell of a lot to me. It was to raise that amount of money was far beyond what I expected to. My initial target was actually 500, so to raise 10 times that was, like I said, far beyond what I expected to do. But the marathon day was probably the most important day of my life with MS, not just because of the fundraising, but between being diagnosed and that time, I couldn't actually accept my diagnosis, and I did find that very difficult. I did find it hard to kind of come to terms with something that could be with me for the rest of my life if there's not a cure. But the moment I crossed the finish line of the marathon was a big turning point in my life, and that was the moment that I accepted my diagnosis. My family were there, some who had travelled quite a considerable distance to be there, and that really did mean a lot to me. And it was a very, very special day, and like I said, it was probably the most important day of my life with MS. And I cannot really emphasize to people how important acceptance is. It's very easy. It took me 7 years to actually accept it. It's not going to happen overnight, but I do feel that is a very, very important step into helping to overcome MS, if you like. So like I said, I had raised £5,000 by the time I'd finished the Loch Ness Marathon in October. And I decided that I wanted to run the Inverness half marathon again the following March, just to try and sort of boost my fundraising a little bit. So I ran the Inverness half marathon again, and by that point I'd raised £6,000 by the time I'd finished that run. And I do feel that the exercise that I had, the training for these events, was really, really good for my MS. Okay, obviously I felt even more tired when I was having to train a lot for these events, but I do highly recommend exercise for as much as possible for people with MS, and because I from experience I really do feel that this has had a positive effect on my MS. Unfortunately, at the moment I can't run as much because I'm awaiting an operation, and I do feel when I'm not running, I do feel a negative effect on my MS. So I think that's another reason why I can't really speak highly enough to try as much as possible to keep active. Even going for it doesn't need to be running marathons or whatever, but if you can just even a bit of exercise, walking. I'm doing quite a bit of walking now, seeing as I can't run, and it has helped me quite a lot. Seeing as I haven't been running, I've been sharing my story on sort of different social networking, particularly Twitter. And I've also been raising awareness of MS every Monday night on Twitter through my Twitter account at @MS_marathon. And this is really, I feel, has really helped to raise the profile of MS. There's 2.5 million people in the world who have MS. 100,000 of them live in the UK. And in my country, Scotland, there's 10,500 people, which is one of the highest prevalences in the world. So that's another reason why I'm very passionate about my fundraising for MS Society Scotland, and I've also met so many great people through Twitter and different social networking sites. And I think this is important because it's easy to kind of want to shut yourself away. I think perhaps when I was a lot younger, I did, to be honest, because I didn't really want to kind of deal with it. And I think now I'm a lot more open about it. I like to share my story to try and give hope to people who felt just like I did when I was first diagnosed, because I would never have thought that I would have done any sort of fundraising, never mind raise. I think I've raised about £13,000 now for MS Society Scotland, which is a staggering amount, and I've had 699 people who have supported me on my online fundraising page, and this is incredible. I mean, the money is amazing, and the money is going to do so much to help people with MS, but also I feel that the raising awareness of MS is equally important, because I think it's important for people to have more knowledge. Also, like I said, be able to know that there is support there, and I've certainly benefited from it. So, if I was to offer advice to anyone or to someone newly diagnosed with MS, I would say my three main things would be to try and have a good diet. I don't follow any particularly special diet, but I'd like to think that I do eat well, I do eat healthily. Another bit of advice I would say, like I said, is to try and exercise as much as you can, just to keep active. I think that's important, and I've certainly felt it's important. So that would definitely be a bit of advice that I would give. And thirdly, accept the diagnosis, which, as I said before, won't happen overnight. This will take time. It took me 7 years, but I do feel that this is really, really important in helping you to look forward. And the day that I did, the day that I accepted it, has had a big impact on sort of my outlook on MS. I'm actually going to add a fourth thing on. Another one I've just thought of is to discuss possible treatment options with your neurologist or your MS nurse, because there's a lot of treatment out there. Even in the sort of 8 years I've had MS for, that there's been a lot of advances, and I feel that it will only be a matter of time before one day that there's a cure for MS. I do believe that. So that was my story of MS. I hope you've enjoyed listening to me. It's my first ever video, and I might make some more at some point. So thanks for listening, watching, and you can follow me on Twitter if you like. It's @MS_marathon. Thank you very much.